Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ namasami. So I'm going to partly read from Buddhadhamma today and partly read an old talk of Ajahn Sumedho, noticing that we're well over halfway through the happiness chapter and not yet halfway through the winter retreat, so slow down a little bit. And this is page 906, section D, Fun in Learning, Happiness in Training. Now let us turn our attention to education. In the process of learning, it is imperative to generate wholesome enthusiasm, for if this does not occur, people will not experience real happiness while learning. The best one can hope for in such a case is to have fun, which is the happiness of someone dedicated to pleasure, similar to the pleasure derived from watching a play or a movie. If wholesome enthusiasm has been generated, whether one's learning process is fun or not becomes a minor, insignificant matter. Granted, having fun fosters motivation and interest in students, and it is an instrument for facilitating an understanding of the gist of the subject at hand. Having fun, however, is not the essence of education. It is not an essential part of the true learning process. In connection to the explanation above, having fun is simply a supportive factor, which one must know how to apply in order to aid wholesome desire and to enter the true learning process. Education begins with wholesome enthusiasm, and it is vital that children possess such desire. Although amusement for children is useful when it successfully helps to generate wholesome desire, without wholesome desire one must rely entirely on having fun, and one must constantly increase this sense of fun. Needing to constantly entertain the children is wearisome for the teachers, who need to come up with new ways of providing the students with fun activities. It is true that an ability to make learning fun is an admirable skill, but it is important to also instill wholesome enthusiasm. It is necessary to distinguish these two qualities and to ensure that fun is not simply a way of gratifying the desire for pleasure, which is often the case, say, by watching a movie. Otherwise, the teacher resembles an actor, and the pleasure derived by having fun is a form of feeding craving. This feeding of craving, by amusing oneself with sights, sounds, etc., gives rise to problems, which then need to be rectified. The basic problem is an attachment to such enjoyment, along with a sense of apathy and boredom, which requires people to seek increasingly greater amounts and degrees of stimulation. Using such entertainment in teaching will at first provide much fun for the students, but eventually they will grow accustomed to it and bored with it. The next time one must add to the amusement, or introduce new forms of entertainment, thus increasing the stimulation and gratification. This becomes an endless cycle. The teachers become fatigued, and the students themselves are at a dead end, spinning around in a vortex of craving. The students become addicted to such entertainment, only seeking amusement. Rather than being fascinated with learning, they wait for the next performance or show. They do not have the desire to learn and to seek knowledge by themselves. In this way, the flow of craving is strengthened. If one is not careful, children will not be interested in learning. Instead, they will only delight in the aspects of entertainment. They will not advance to acquiring vital information, and they will not generate wholesome enthusiasm. For this reason, it is essential that one understands the proper role of entertainment and fun in education. Having fun helps to create an initial interest in learning. It is a preliminary and external factor in the true process of learning. It acts as a link to something greater, not as an end goal. The true purpose of external factors in education is to generate internal factors within an individual. Teachers are an outside influence. Part paratokosa, a voice of encouragement and guidance. Ideally, they are a positive influence and act as virtuous friends, kalyanamitta. They transmit knowledge and promote certain kinds of seeing, listening, and thinking in order for the pupils to generate their own interest and enthusiasm, which then becomes the driving force in their studies. Besides transmitting specific information, the true success of a teacher thus rests with his or her ability to help generate wholesome enthusiasm within the students. If teachers do not have this aim, then all they can do is entertain the students, which eventually leads to apathy and boredom on the part of the students and fatigue on the part of the teachers. Teachers, virtuous friends, or other external influences need thus to act as a medium, linking external factors with internal factors and helping students to generate virtuous qualities within themselves. Otherwise, teachers reinforce in the students the characteristic of being dependent on others. If teachers understand the true responsibility of the teaching profession, they will seek ways to facilitate an understanding in the students of the subject materials and to introduce an interest in learning. If students develop this wholesome enthusiasm, they can progress in their studies independently. Although the teacher is not present, they will say, "I have a subject of study to pursue. I want to research this matter. I wish to go to the library and read up on this subject." They will derive happiness from this research because it satisfies their interest in learning. It fulfills the desire to gain knowledge. In this way, learning will progress naturally and automatically. If we are able to generate the wholesome desire as the starting point in our studies, our entire way of life and pursuit of happiness will change, and the new kind of happiness that gradually increases throughout this process is exceptional and unexpected. Before, we only relied on craving, seeking to obtain and consume things. We excitedly pursued desirable sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and tangibles for consumption. When we experienced these things, we felt gratification. Yet when we encountered undesirable objects, we were displeased, irritated, and distressed. Our happiness and unhappiness was entirely dependent on likes and dislikes, subject to craving, and our views on happiness were limited to this dynamic. When one gives rise to wholesome enthusiasm, one experiences a new form of desire. One wishes to truly learn about things and to act in order to bring about improvement. When one obtains knowledge or does things well, one is happy, and this happiness increases exponentially. One's relationship changes even to those things that are unpleasant and were formerly distressing. When one sees that there are aspects to undesirable things that are worthy of study and investigation, one wants to understand them. One asks such questions as, "How is this object bad? Why is this object undesirable?" One begins to appreciate unpleasant things because they provide an opportunity for learning. Wholesome enthusiasm leads people to appreciate and even to derive joy from undesirable things and situations. This happiness stems from gaining knowledge and from one's own skillful actions. Note that wholesome enthusiasm is associated with and must be accompanied by wisdom, panya. This is unlike craving, which is accompanied by ignorance, avijja, and requires no wisdom. Craving can arise at all times, while wholesome desire is only developed with the help of wisdom. How is wholesome desire accompanied by wisdom? Say one encounters a disagreeable, unpleasant object, which is rejected by craving. Yet when wisdom recognizes that the object is beneficial in some way, wholesome enthusiasm participates in the process. The desire to know and the desire to act are set in motion, and happiness follows along with the fulfillment of this desire. With the introduction of wholesome enthusiasm, likes and dislikes based on craving lose almost all of their influence and power. Those things previously considered unacceptable by craving, those things which used to be deplorable and cause affliction, now with the power of wisdom and wholesome desire are able to provide happiness. In this way, one who begins a true form of education and training is able to find happiness even in those things that do not offer gratification to craving. This process of learning then develops, whereby preferences and aversions gradually lose their ability to overwhelm and sway the mind. One's attention, thoughts, and happiness centers around knowledge and skillful action. This is how someone like Albert Einstein comes to be. It's the second time he's mentioned Albert Einstein. On a practical level, one is able to establish an education system promoting a basic level of wholesome enthusiasm. The nation will have an increased number of creators who will offset those consumers who have no desire to act other than to find ways to satisfy their craving. In sum, this process involves a delight in the goodness and completion of something. If the object has not yet reached such a state of goodness and completion, one wants to act in order to help bring about this state, and one wants to know what needs to be done to accomplish this. Alternatively, the desire to know precedes the desire to act. When one has gained the necessary knowledge, one is able to act according to one's wishes. When one completes the action and satisfies one's desire, happiness follows, and this happiness increases the more one accomplishes. The desire to know and the desire to act function in unison. These aspects of desire lead to and are accompanied by happiness and true learning. If these two aspects of desire are absent, learning will be difficult and students will be unwilling and unhappy. If one is able to generate wholesome enthusiasm, learning will proceed automatically, in the same way as the Buddha stated that with dawn as harbinger, the rising of the sun is guaranteed. In connection to society, to the relationship with other people, wholesome desire can be expanded into 4 spiritual qualities referred to as the 4 divine abidings, the Brahmaviharas: loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, sympathetic joy, mudita, and equanimity, upekkha. Here, one can see how the development of desire runs parallel to the development of happiness. In fact, these 2 forms of development are identical. As one elevates desire from craving to wholesome enthusiasm, and as one develops this enthusiasm, happiness is expanded and deepened. Now I'll read from Porsamedo.
Also, I'd just like to mention that Payutto is probably the foremost person instrumental in the last 2 decades in fostering a whole Buddhist education movement in Thailand, and so his thoughts, he's written in Buddhadhamma, but then he's also written all sorts of essays and given lectures on specifically around education, trying to get education more infused with Buddhist principles and infused with that kind of love of learning and wholesome desire and action, and so making it something that is interesting, and so and of course that's what Ajahn Jayasaro has been inspired by as well, in being a sponsor for a few different schools, but Payutto has been kind of at the leading edge as the kind of mentor or role model of that. That's in many places throughout the country. It's quite interesting, actually.
And this excerpt from a talk is Ajahn Sumedho talks to the monastic community at Wat Nanachat in May 1989. And a little booklet that I discovered somewhere, I think it was in a box of stuff to be done something with, or whatever, that I was looking through. And this is an excerpt from one of those talks. It's on page 28. And this is a talk given at Evening Puja on May 17th, 1989. and it isn't completely on subject, but it does for me, that parts of this brought up just that idea of learning, like trying to find how we can actually learn how to do this, how to live this lifestyle. In England, we've had to take care of sick people. Some monks have very poor health, various back problems and knee problems, and endless kinds of ailments needing consideration as to how to work through them. The monks themselves with their particular health problems, but also the community as a whole. Do we want just a community of healthy and tough young men? Or can a community perhaps also include and open up to a wider range of age, abilities, and levels of health? I know for a lot of young men it's very important to prove that one is tough and one can do all these things. This is also to be recognized, the masculine need for rites of passage into the adult male world that might be motivating us. Nevertheless, it is good to get to know our limits. What is it like to go without sleep or food? If we want to test ourselves, that's fair enough. It's good practice, actually. But then we each have to know our limits. Some of us have to learn how to operate with the limits of poor health, having little physical reserve and a weak constitution. We need to apply mindfulness and wisdom when the body is not healthy and needs to rest quite frequently, or needs certain kinds of nourishment. One of the monks has so much tension all the time that he's been incredibly constipated most of his monastic life. These constipation problems arise because of the driving tension of willing oneself. Learning how to practice is finding a balance. Finding out how to balance things out, when to take it easy and when to tighten things up. This is something each one of us has to really observe in ourselves and in the community. We can be very idealistic, thinking a good monk should be like this, wearing rag robes, eating only what is offered, being able to live in whatever place is given, surviving just on fermented urine for medicine. Taking this ideal from our basic reflections, the ideal of not sleeping very much, not eating very much, not speaking very much. If we attach to these ideals without understanding what we're doing, then the result is we lose our sense of humor and become very tense. All kinds of unpleasant results can occur. Maybe we can do it for a while, but then we find ourselves falling apart. When the supportive conditions for such a practice aren't there, we lose our momentum. In observing this, we can begin to see how to relax, how to apply more effort, how to let go. We learn when to push ourselves and create energy, but without taking or holding on to an idealistic position of how it should be permanently. Good practice is being strict all the time. Having the high ideals we believe in so firmly, quite suddenly we feel despair. Many people leave because they just cannot stand the idea of living that way and always feeling a sense of failure in regard to it. When I talk about reflection, what we do is just look at what's driving us, what kind of ideals we have. It's not that we shouldn't have ideals, but what are our expectations and the results of our life so far? What is it we are attached to and holding on to? What are we doing that's causing a particular result? This is a way of self-knowledge, of looking into the way things are. We are not judging that we shouldn't be strict or push ourselves. I'm not taking a position for or against these things, but I emphasize the need to recognize what we are actually doing and the result of it. This is what practice is all about, what we're actually doing. We're not just trying to live up to an ideal of what a good monk should be, but we're observing the results of what we're doing. What would good results be? Well, if we're still suffering and full of anxiety, doubt, stress, fear, and dullness, caught in restlessness, jealousy, envy, anger, greed, and all that, then we're obviously doing something not quite right. Maybe we're trying to purify ourselves, getting rid of our defilements, killing our kilesas, making ourselves into something else and trying to wipe out or annihilate the bad habits. Maybe we want to prove ourselves or get approval from others. Or maybe we're trying to be something we think we should be. Anything that comes from the self-view will always take us to some kind of negative result and despair. These go hand in hand. If we have a sense of self, we're also going to have disillusionment and a sense of despair. When we read the Ajahn biography, what does that do to us? People think they would really like to be like Ajahn and do all the things that he did. We seem to forget that this is an idealized biography of a great monk. What is it actually when we want to become like that? That mental state of wanting to become something, or thinking that one has to do all those things in order to become enlightened. This is a drawback with biographies. If I were to write my biography, there are a lot of things I just wouldn't tell you about, to be honest. I'd prefer to talk about the time I nearly died under the tin roof with all the little flies going up my nose, my ears, my mouth, the terrible food, the heat, the infection, and the utter despair. But then I aroused myself to sit up straight, and suddenly I saw the light. That's a very inspiring story. But what I would write in my biography are the things on that level, interesting, inspiring examples of practice. But there are a lot of things I think others wouldn't be interested in. They are so ordinary and boring. One just wouldn't want to fill page after page about the monotony of monastic life that we've experienced most of the time in this form. We take the choice bits, the supreme challenges, and maybe the failures and successes of this life. With that, we might create a very fascinating biography. But don't get me wrong, I'm not condemning the biography of Ajahn Mun either. We can observe, though, how we can idealize monasticism and try to live up to very high standards of asceticism and practice. We don't realize what we're actually doing because there's no understanding of what's motivating us and what we're grasping. A problem that arises when there is any set form is that some seem to fit into the ideal form more than others. Those who feel that they don't quite fit into the ideal form might draw the conclusion that this isn't a suitable life for them. Maybe some of us can't chant very well, recite the Patimokkha, or maybe we're not very good at chatting with the lay people. Not everyone can be a gifted, charismatic teacher. Maybe we never learned to be really fluent in Thai or make the ladies laugh, be charming and witty and get all the praise. It's a strong attraction in this life here in Thailand. If we can say funny things and make people laugh and speak the language well, we get enormous amounts of praise. It's always nice to be appreciated. When there is the old sour grape type of monk that says, they're just superficial, not really serious practitioners. I don't do that. I'm not going to sit up on that high seat and make the ladies laugh. The sour grape type of mind, which puts down the one who chants well and never makes a mistake in the Patimokkha. The one that is witty and charming, speaks perfect Thai, and gets all the praise. If we're being negative, we can regard that as superficial and not the practice. We look down our nose at such a despicable, silly kind of monk, which is another kind of delusion, isn't it? We each have our own particular character to live with. This life isn't meant for just a certain kind of character, suitable only for some and not for others. We always have to keep in mind that the priority of this life is to see the Dhamma here and now. It is not our purpose to become a teacher or a missionary or a popular and charismatic figure, or to be able to do everything perfectly well, to have a lot of disciples, to ordain many monks and set up branch monasteries. All of this is not what we're here for. At least that's not what I'm here for. If these things happen, it's all right. One is willing to encourage and try to create suitable situations for teaching, practicing, and listening to Dhamma. But the priority always has to be with seeing the Dhamma in the present moment, not being deluded and pushing aside the truth of the way it is now because we are caught up in a mission or something important on the worldly plane. In my position, for example, people have all kinds of expectations of me. Sometimes I used to find it really unbearable and began to feel a lot of resentment about this. But the priority was always to observe the way things are in the present moment. If I'd followed this resentment, of course, then I'd be suffering. But in just looking at it, that tendency to create a problem about that particular thing or any other thing drops away. More and more, a confidence and a space and a strength arises to be here and now without making comments, neither being pulled in, nor intimidated, nor wanting to please and be an impeccable monk who fulfills the expectations of other people. So we keep learning from life's experiences. Always my reflection in daily life, this is the way it is, it's like this. If people leave, monks disrobe, anagarikas run away, or nuns fall in love with swamis, we might feel quite disappointed. For instance, a monk for whom we had great expectations suddenly leaves. Life is up and down. Instead of creating a problem about it, we remember that the practice is about here and now, not about personalities, the expectations we have, the way we might be disappointed about somebody, the hurt feelings. They're just part of our human experience. They can always be seen here and now as Dhamma. All that arises ceases. That is the way things are. We're not trying to make ourselves into an unfeeling, indifferent kind of person to the point where we don't care what anybody thinks. If everybody leaves, it wouldn't mean anything to us. The world can fall apart, we'll be totally indifferent. Someone who is no longer sensitive and does not feel anything at all. Sometimes we may imagine that's what an arhat is like. No matter what's happening, he's completely indifferent and unimpressed. Is that really the way it is? From my experience, the way it is that this is a very sensitive world. Planetary life, consciousness, and the human form, the whole realm is one of great sensitivity, feeling, and emotion, psychic phenomena. So the reflection that all that is subject to arising is subject to ceasing and is not self isn't a dismissal of it or an insensitivity to the way it is, to its power or quality, but it's the ability to be patient and bear with the vicissitudes of life and to learn from them. I'll end the reading there.